The envelope was addressed to both of them, but I was the one who opened it. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, 6 years of marriage turned to ash. It was a Friday afternoon, late January. I'd left the office early because the structural analysis on the Pemberton project had finally cleared review, and I figured I'd surprise Victoria with dinner reservations at that Italian place she liked. She was at a marketing conference in San Diego, or so she told me, and wouldn't be back until Sunday, but I wanted to have something nice planned for when she returned. The mail was the usual assortment of junk and bills, credit card offer, furniture catalog, electric bill, and then a plain white envelope from Lakewood Fertility Center, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Cole. I almost tossed it in the to-file pile without opening it. We hadn't had an appointment at Lakewood in 3 months. After the 4th failed IVF cycle, Victoria had suggested we take a break. "We need to recover emotionally," she'd said, her hand on my cheek, her eyes full of what I'd mistaken for shared grief. "Let's just breathe for a while." I'd agreed. Of course I had. I would have agreed to anything she asked. That was the kind of husband I was. Devoted, accommodating, convinced that if I just tried hard enough, did everything right, we'd eventually have the family we'd been working toward for 3 years. But something made me open that envelope. The statement showed charges I didn't recognize. Extended consultation services. 6 appointments over 4 months. Medication management review. Billed to our insurance. I scanned the dates, my engineer's mind automatically cross-referencing them against my mental calendar. November 3rd. Victoria had been at a client dinner. November 17th. Working late on the Pearson account. December 8th. Girls' night with Monica. December 22nd. Holiday shopping, don't peek. January 5th. Yoga retreat day. January 19th. 3 days ago. Team building workshop. We hadn't had an IVF appointment together in 3 months. Our treatment was on pause. So why was my wife going to the fertility clinic 6 times without me? I sat down at the kitchen table. The afternoon light was doing that golden thing it does in winter, slanting through the windows and making everything look warm and peaceful. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could look so normal when something inside me had just cracked open. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. That's not who I am. I'm a structural engineer. I build things that don't collapse. When I encounter a problem, I analyze it. I gather data. I find the failure point. I took a photo of the statement with my phone. Then I opened my laptop and logged into our shared health insurance portal. The password was saved on the family computer. Victoria had never bothered to change it. It took me 11 minutes to find the claim that ended my marriage. 7 months ago, August 15th. A women's health clinic I'd never heard of, 40 minutes from our house. Procedure code, IUD insertion. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something. IUD intrauterine device. Birth control. My wife had gotten birth control inserted 7 months ago, while we were actively doing IVF. While I was injecting myself with hormones every morning, changing my diet, wearing loose boxers, taking cold showers, scheduling my life around sperm motility optimization protocols. While I was blaming myself for every failed cycle because my numbers were borderline, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the reason we couldn't have a baby. She was never going to have my child. Not anymore. Maybe not ever again. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the street. Normal sounds. Ordinary life continuing while mine fell apart. I looked at our wedding photo on the bookshelf. Victoria in white, radiant and laughing. Me beside her, grinning like I'd won the lottery. 6 years ago. A different lifetime. I remembered our first IVF consultation, the hopeful nervousness. Victoria squeezing my hand under the table as the doctor explained the process. "We're going to get through this together," she'd whispered, "no matter what it takes." I remembered the first failed cycle, the way she'd cried in my arms, her body shaking with grief that I now understood was performance. The way I'd held her and said, "We'll try again. We won't give up." I remembered the third cycle, the one that got furthest along before ending in another negative test. I'd been so convinced it was my fault. My borderline numbers, my body failing us. Victoria had stroked my hair and told me, "It's not your fault, baby. These things just happen sometimes." She'd known. She'd known it wasn't my fault because she'd made sure we wouldn't succeed, and she'd watched me blame myself anyway. No tears came. Just a cold, heavy stillness, like concrete setting in my chest. Something fundamental had broken, and unlike the structures I built for a living, I knew instinctively that this one couldn't be repaired. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I excavated. There's a particular kind of focus that takes over when you're searching for the truth you're terrified to find. Every click of the mouse felt deliberate, surgical. I was dismantling my marriage piece by piece, and some part of me understood there would be no putting it back together. Our phone records were the first revelation. I'm the account holder, have been since we got married and combined our plans. I'd never once thought to check Victoria's call history. Why would I? I trusted her completely. The pattern was obvious once I looked. One number appearing over and over, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. Long calls late at night when she'd told me she was catching up on emails, brief calls during lunch hours, texts I couldn't read but could count, hundreds of them, stretching back 18 months. It took me 20 minutes on Google to trace the number. Dr. Adam Hartley, reproductive endocrinologist at Lakewood Fertility Center. The same doctor who'd consulted on our case twice, who'd reviewed my test results and suggested adjustments to my supplement regimen, who'd sat across from us in his expensive office and talked about optimizing outcomes and staying positive. He'd looked me in the eye and shaken my hand while he was sleeping with my wife. The credit card statements confirmed it. Hotels I'd never heard of. Restaurants that weren't anywhere near her office or our usual haunts. The charges lined up perfectly with her late work nights, and girlfriend weekends, and self-care days. I found a $4,200 charge at a jewelry store from October. I'd never seen any new jewelry on Victoria. The date matched Adam Hartley's birthday. I knew because the clinic had sent a generic "Happy Birthday" to our staff email that week. She'd bought her lover a $4,000 gift. With our money. While I was calculating whether we could afford another IVF cycle. The browser history on our home computer was the next wound. Victoria always used her phone or work laptop for anything private, but she'd gotten careless a few times on the family desktop. The searches were still there in the history, never cleared. How to ask for divorce without looking like the bad guy. Signs your marriage is over. Apartments for rent downtown. Starting over at 35. The searches were dated 4 months ago. October. Around the same time she'd bought that watch. She'd been planning her exit while I was planning our future. The photos were the final blow. Hidden in a folder on her tablet. The one synced to our family iCloud account that she'd apparently forgotten about. Nothing explicit, thank God for small mercies, but intimate in a way that felt worse somehow. Victoria in a hotel bathrobe, looking over her shoulder at the camera with a smile I hadn't seen in years. In the background, reflected in a mirror, Adam Hartley pulling on a shirt. The photo was dated September 12th. The same day she'd told me she was at a wellness retreat with her college roommate. I closed the laptop at 3 a.m. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. But somewhere inside me, a man who had trusted completely was dying, and a different man was taking his place. I called my sister Rachel at 7 a.m. She's a divorce attorney, has been for 15 years. When I told her what I'd found, there was a long pause. "Nathan," she said finally, "don't do anything until I get there. And whatever you do, don't let her know you know." "I'm not going to confront her." "Good. I'll be there by noon." "Rachel." "Yeah?" "How do I sit across from her at dinner and pretend everything's fine?" Another pause. Then, "You've been doing it for 18 months without knowing. Now you'll do it knowing. It won't be harder, just different." She was right. That was the thing that kept hitting me as I showered and dressed and made coffee, like it was any other Saturday morning. Rachel arrived at 11:30. She's 5 years younger than me, but she's always been the fierce one, the one who got into fights defending kids on the playground, who argued with teachers, who went to law school specifically because she wanted to make people pay for being terrible. She hugged me hard when I opened the door, then pulled back and studied my face. "You look calm," she said. "That worries me." "I am calm." "Nathan, you just found out your wife has been cheating on you for a year and a half and sabotaging your fertility treatments. Nobody's that calm." "I'm an engineer. I solve problems." "You're also human. You're allowed to fall apart." "I'll fall apart later. Right now, I need to think." She followed me into the kitchen, where I'd spread out everything I'd found. The billing statement, printouts of the phone records, screenshots of the browser history, the insurance claim for the IUD. Rachel sat down and started going through it all, her lawyer face settling into place. After 10 minutes, she looked up at me. "This is comprehensive. You did good work." "There's more." I showed her the journal app on Victoria's tablet. The entry from 18 months ago. "I'm starting to realize I don't want Nathan's child. It's not the baby I don't want. It's the life. With him. I can't tell him. He'd be destroyed. I'll figure something out." Rachel read it twice. When she looked at me again, her eyes were wet. "Oh, Nathan." "She sabotaged all of them," I said. "Not just the last cycle. For a year and a half, she let me believe we were failing because of me. She watched me blame myself. She handed me the needles for my hormone injections every morning, knowing it was all pointless. Nathan." She sat with me when I cried after the third failure, held my hand, told me we'd get through it together. And the whole time, she'd already decided she didn't want my children, that she didn't want me. Rachel reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "You didn't deserve this. You know that, right? None of this is your fault." "I know." And I did know, intellectually. But somewhere deeper, in the part of me that had spent 3 years believing I was the problem, that knowledge hadn't fully landed yet. "I'm not looking for sympathy," I said. "I'm looking for a strategy." Rachel wiped her eyes and nodded. "Okay, strategy. Let me call my colleague David. He handles complex divorces. We need to start planning." Victoria came home Monday evening, breezing through the door with her suitcase and a shopping bag from the airport. "Baby." She dropped her bags and hugged me. "I missed you so much." That conference was endless. 3 days of PowerPoints about synergy and brand alignment. I thought I was going to lose my mind. She smelled like hotel soap and airplane recycled air, and the perfume she always wore. For 6 years, that scent had meant home and comfort and love. Now it made my stomach turn. "Welcome back." I kissed her cheek, keeping my hands at my sides for just a half second before wrapping them around her. She didn't notice. "How was San Diego?" "Sunny, at least. The hotel was nice." "Oh, I got you something." She pulled a tie out of the shopping bag. Blue silk with a subtle pattern. Probably $40 from the hotel gift shop. "It reminded me of you," she said, pressing it into my hands. "For your important meetings." "Thank you," I managed to smile. "I'll wear it to the anniversary dinner." Speaking of which, she bounced on her heels. Dad called me yesterday. He's definitely coming for the dinner. He's so excited to celebrate 6 years with us. James Lawson, my father-in-law, retired military officer, 22 years of service, a man whose entire life was built on discipline and duty and loyalty. He adored Victoria, his only child, his princess. And Victoria's need for his approval was the one thing I'd always understood as clearly as load-bearing calculations. Perfect, I said. I'll plan something special. She beamed at me and headed upstairs to unpack. I stood in the kitchen, turning the tie over in my hands, wondering if Adam Hartley had been there when she bought it. Wondering if they'd laughed about it together. The anniversary dinner was in 3 weeks. I had work to do. Rachel's colleague David was a silver-haired man in his 60s who'd been handling divorces longer than I'd been alive. We met in his corner office downtown, where the view of the city seemed designed to remind clients that their problems were small in the grand scheme of things. "Let me make sure I understand the situation," David said, reviewing the file Rachel had prepared. "Your wife has been having an affair for approximately 18 months. During this time, she secretly obtained birth control while you were both supposedly undergoing fertility treatments. She deliberately sabotaged multiple IVF cycles, which cost approximately $87,000 in total. And the man she's been seeing is the doctor who consulted on your case." "That's correct. Have you confronted her?" "No." David raised an eyebrow. "Most people in your situation would have had a screaming match by now." "I'm not most people." He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a moment. "No, I can see that. Mr. Cole, I've been doing this for 40 years. This is one of the most methodically documented cases of betrayal I've ever seen. You've given us a tremendous amount to work with. What are my options?" "Several. First, there's the financial angle. Your state recognizes dissipation of marital assets during an affair. Every dollar your wife spent on this relationship, hotels, gifts, travel, you can claim against her share in the divorce. The IVF costs are trickier, but given the evidence of deliberate sabotage, we can argue those were marital assets she intentionally wasted. Can we prove she sabotaged them? The IUD insertion is key. You can't accidentally get birth control implanted. Combined with her journal entries expressing her desire to avoid having your child, we can establish a clear pattern of deception. Any reasonable judge will see it." "What about the doctor?" David exchanged a look with Rachel. "That's where it gets interesting. Dr. Hartley consulted on your case, correct? He reviewed your test results, made recommendations about your treatment?" "Twice. He looked at my hormone levels and suggested I adjust my supplement regimen. He reviewed my motility results and said we should consider different timing. So technically, he was your doctor too. And then he began a relationship with your wife while she was still a patient. That's a clear violation of medical ethics. At minimum, it's grounds for a complaint to the state medical board. Depending on how the board views it, he could face license suspension or revocation." Something shifted in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the feeling when a structural problem suddenly reveals its solution. What would I need to document that? You'd need to prove the doctor-patient relationship existed and that the affair began during or shortly after active treatment. Which you've already done, based on what I'm seeing here. David tapped the folder. The phone records show their contact began approximately 6 months after your initial consultation with him. The frequency and duration of calls establishes that this wasn't a professional relationship. "And the previous complaints against him?" Rachel jumped in. "Our investigator found 2 previous patients who filed complaints against Dr. Hartley. Both were settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. The man has a pattern: vulnerable women in fertility treatment. Your wife isn't the first. She's just the latest." David nodded. "That pattern strengthens your case considerably. It shows this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was predatory behavior." I thought about Adam Hartley shaking my hand in his office. About the way he'd said, "Don't give up hope, Nathan. These things take time." About the $4,200 watch on his wrist that my wife had bought him. "I want to take everything from both of them," I said, "but I want to do it right, clean, by the book." David smiled, a thin, professional smile that had probably preceded many devastating legal actions. "Then let's talk about strategy." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled demolition. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Gail, who'd been recommended by David's firm. She was efficient and discreet and completely unsentimental about the work. "You want surveillance and documentation," she said at our first meeting. "Not confrontation. I gather evidence. I don't create drama." That's exactly what I need. Within a week, she had photos of Victoria and Adam at a hotel downtown. Receipts from their dinner the night before. Time-stamped images of them walking hand in hand into a boutique where Victoria bought him a cashmere sweater. "He's comfortable," Gail observed when she delivered the file. "They're not being careful at all. Either they think they're invincible or they've gotten lazy." 18 months is a long time to keep a secret. In my experience, the longer an affair goes, the sloppier the participants become. They start believing their own cover stories. I also obtained my complete medical records from Lakewood. There, in black and white, were Dr. Hartley's notes from our consultations, his recommendations about my treatment, his signature on forms that established, beyond any doubt, that he had been my doctor too. The medical board attorney Rachel had found was cautiously optimistic. Sexual relationships with patients' spouses during active treatment is a serious ethical violation in this state, especially when the affair began while the spouse was still in the doctor's care. If you can prove the timeline, you have grounds for a board complaint. I can prove it. Good. But you should also know, these processes take time. Even with solid evidence, a license revocation could take a year or more. I'm not in a hurry. The hardest part was the waiting. Going home every night to Victoria. Eating dinner with her. Watching television together. Lying beside her in bed while she scrolled through her phone, texting God knows what to Adam Hartley. She never suspected. That was the thing that amazed me. I'd read about how cheaters often become paranoid, certain their spouse must know, reading suspicion into every glance and question. But Victoria was utterly confident in her deception. She'd been lying for so long it had become her natural state. One evening, about 2 weeks before the anniversary, she planned a romantic dinner at home. Candles on the table, my favorite meal, beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine that cost more than we usually spent. "What's the occasion?" I asked as she set the table. "Does there need to be an occasion?" She smiled at me, that radiant smile that had captured me 7 years ago at a friend's wedding. "I just wanted us to have a nice evening. We've been so stressed with everything. I thought we could reconnect." Reconnect. The word tasted like ash. "This looks amazing," I said, taking my seat. "You went all out. You deserve it." She poured the wine with a practiced flourish. "You've been so patient through everything. The IVF stuff, all the disappointments. Most husbands would have cracked by now." I almost laughed. Almost. I made a commitment. "And that's what I love about you. Your steadiness, your reliability." She lifted her glass. "To us." "To us." We clinked glasses. The wine was excellent, a Napa Cabernet she knew I liked. I wondered if Adam had helped her pick it out, if they'd discussed how to keep me placated while they planned their future. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, cutting into her steak. "Maybe we should take that trip to Italy we've always talked about, this summer. Get away from everything." "That sounds nice." "I know things have been hard, the fertility stuff, work stress. We haven't really been connected lately." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm against mine. I want to fix that. I looked at her hand on mine. The wedding ring I'd saved for 6 months to buy. The French manicure she'd gotten for the conference in San Diego. What do you think needs fixing? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She tilted her head, considering. I don't know, just us. The spark. Remember how we used to be? Those first couple years? We couldn't keep our hands off each other. We talked for hours about everything. What changed? A flicker of something crossed her face. Guilt, maybe? Or the calculation of how to answer safely. The baby stuff, I guess. It consumed everything. Every conversation was about cycles and timing and test results. We lost ourselves in it. You're right, I said. We did. So let's find ourselves again. Italy. 2 weeks. Vineyards and ruins and no responsibilities. What do you say? I thought about the surveillance photos in Gail's file. Victoria and Adam walking through a vineyard in Napa 3 months ago, her head on his shoulder, both of them laughing. Maybe Italy had been his idea first. I'd love that, I said. Let's do it. She beamed at me and squeezed my hand. Really? Oh, Nathan, that makes me so happy. I'll start looking at flights tomorrow. After dinner, we moved to the couch. She curled into my side and turned on a movie we'd both seen before. Her head rested on my shoulder. She traced patterns on my arm with her fingertips. I love you, she said. You know that, right? No matter what happens, no matter how hard things get, I love you. I looked at her hand on my arm. The wedding ring I'd saved for 6 months to buy. The French manicure she'd gotten for the conference in San Diego. I know, I said. I love you too. The words came out smooth and easy. I'd had 6 years of practice saying them. The movie played on. Victoria fell asleep against my shoulder, her breathing slow and even. I sat perfectly still, watching the screen without seeing it, counting the days until the dinner. I made the phone call I hadn't planned on making 2 weeks before the dinner. Diane Hartley, Adam's wife, mother of his 2 teenage daughters. A pediatric nurse who'd built a life with a man who'd been betraying her for years. Victoria wasn't his first affair, the PI had discovered. Just the most recent. I found her number through the investigator. Called from a blocked ID on a Thursday afternoon. Hello? Her voice was warm, professional. A nurse's voice. Mrs. Hartley, my name is Nathan Cole. I need to speak with you privately about something important. Do you have a few minutes? A pause. I'm sorry, do I know you? Not yet, but you're going to want to hear what I have to say. Is your husband home? No, he's at work. Mr. Cole, what is this about? I took a breath. Mrs. Hartley, I'm going to tell you something that will change your life. I'm not doing it to hurt you. I'm doing it because you deserve to know what I had to learn alone. Your husband has been having an affair with my wife for 18 months. Silence. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, who is this? If this is some kind of prank, it's not a prank. Victoria Cole. That's my wife's name. Your husband met her when she came to the clinic for a second opinion consultation. The affair started about 2 months later. I have dates, locations, photographs. I have phone records showing they talk multiple times a day. I have credit card receipts from hotels and restaurants. I have everything. More silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Flatter. Colder. How long have you known? 3 weeks. I found out by accident, a billing statement from the clinic. 3 weeks. And you're just now calling me? I needed to gather evidence first. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening, and I needed to figure out what to do about it. What are you going to do about it? I'm filing for divorce. I'm also filing a complaint with the medical board for ethics violations. Your husband treated me as a patient and then began an affair with my wife. That's grounds for license suspension at minimum. A sharp intake of breath. You're going after his license? Yes. Why are you telling me this? Why not just let me find out when the complaint goes public? I'd thought about that question a lot. The honest answer was complicated. Part justice, part shared pain, part the simple human need not to be alone in devastation. Because I didn't have anyone to tell me, I said. I had to find out from a billing statement. I had to piece together my wife's betrayal one credit card receipt at a time. No one came to me and said, here's the truth. Here's what's happening in your own house. I had to excavate it myself. So you're paying it forward. Something like that. Also because your husband isn't just a cheater, Mrs. Hartley. He's a predator. My wife isn't his first patient spouse. There have been others. At least 2 that I know of. Complaints that were settled quietly, NDAs signed. He has a pattern. He targets vulnerable women going through fertility treatment. Women who are emotional and desperate and willing to believe someone understands them. Diane made a sound I couldn't quite identify. Not crying exactly. More like the air going out of her. I suspected, she said quietly. Years ago. There were signs. But I never had proof, and we have daughters, and I convinced myself I was being paranoid. You weren't paranoid? No, I suppose I wasn't. I'm going to send you a link to a secure folder, I said. Everything I have is in there. Photos, documents, records. You can look at it or not. That's your choice. But I thought you should have the option. What happens now? For me? I wait. I have a plan. I'm confronting Victoria at our anniversary dinner in 2 weeks. Her father will be there. I want her to have to answer for what she's done in front of the one person whose opinion she actually cares about. That's cold, Diane said, but there was no judgment in her voice, just observation. She made me inject myself with hormones for 3 years while she had birth control inside her. She let me grieve imaginary children. She watched me blame myself for our failures. Cold doesn't begin to cover it. No, Diane agreed. I don't suppose it does. What about you? What are you going to do? A long pause. I could almost hear her thinking, weighing options, calculating futures. I'm going to see a divorce attorney tomorrow, she said finally. I'm going to protect my finances and my daughter's futures, and when the time is right, I'm going to confront my husband. But I'll give you a heads up before I do, in case it affects your timing. I'd appreciate that. And Mr. Cole? Yes? Thank you for telling me. People keep saying I should be angry that you called, that you had no right to interfere in my marriage. But you know what? You're the first person who treated me like I deserved to know the truth. Like I was a human being with the right to make informed decisions about my own life. You're welcome. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry we had to meet this way. So am I. She hung up. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, staring at my phone, feeling the strange kinship of the betrayed. The call changed everything. Diane Hartley was not a woman who crumbled. She was a woman who strategized. She called me back the next day. I looked at everything you sent. I believe you. And I found something you should know. What? Adam's been moving money for months. Small transfers, restructuring our investments, pushing me to refinance the house. I thought he was just being paranoid about the economy. But he's preparing to leave. He's been planning his exit. For Victoria? That would be my guess. He's never been this systematic about an affair before. Before. A bitter laugh. Mr. Cole, I've suspected things for years. Little signs. Late nights. Conference trips that didn't quite add up. But I never had proof, and I have 2 daughters to think about. So I convinced myself I was imagining things. A pause. I'm done convincing myself. What are you going to do? I'm going to see a divorce attorney tomorrow, and when the time is right, I'm going to confront my husband. But not yet. I want to get my finances secured first. I understand. When are you planning to move? 3 weeks. My anniversary dinner. Her father will be there. Diane made a small sound, almost admiration. You're going to expose her in front of her father? He's a military man. 22 years of service, discipline, duty, loyalty. Those words mean everything to him. His approval is the one thing Victoria values more than anything else in the world. That's thorough. I'm an engineer, Mrs. Hartley. When I take something apart, I take it all the way apart. I met James Lawson at a diner 3 days before the anniversary. Neutral territory, man to man. He was waiting in a booth when I arrived. Ramrod straight posture, steel gray hair cropped short, the bearing of someone who'd spent 2 decades giving orders and expecting them to be followed. He stood when he saw me and shook my hand firmly. Nathan, you sounded serious on the phone. Is everything all right with Victoria? No, sir. That's what I need to talk to you about. His eyes sharpened. Is she sick? Was there an accident? She's healthy. This is a different kind of problem. We sat down. I ordered coffee. James watched me with the alert stillness of someone trained to assess threats. Tell me. I laid it out for him. Everything. The billing statement, the IUD, the affair with Dr. Hartley, the sabotaged IVF cycles, the journal entries, the phone records, the photographs. I'd brought a folder with printed evidence, redacted where necessary but clear enough to prove my claims. James went through it page by page, his face unreadable. But I saw his jaw tighten when he reached the photo of Victoria in the hotel bathrobe. His hand trembled slightly on the insurance claim for the IUD. He stopped on the journal entry, read it twice, 3 times. This is her handwriting? It's a digital journal app, but the account is linked to her email. The timestamps are verified. It's definitely her. He kept reading, and I watched something change in his face. The military stoicism cracked just slightly, and underneath I saw something raw. Grief, maybe. Or the particular pain of a parent confronting the failure of everything they thought they'd taught. When he finished, he set the folder down and stared at it for a long moment. You're certain about all of this? Yes, sir. No possibility of misunderstanding? Misinterpretation? None. I verified everything multiple ways. I hired a private investigator. I consulted with attorneys. I've cross-referenced every piece of evidence. This is real. James nodded slowly. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. What do you need from me? I'm planning to confront her at the anniversary dinner, in front of family. I want her to have to answer for what she's done with you present. But I won't do it if you're going to warn her. Warn her? A flash of something, anger, disgust, crossed his face. Nathan, I raised that girl to have honor, to value integrity, to understand that trust once broken can never be fully restored. He shook his head. What she's done to you? I don't recognize the person who could do these things. I'm sorry, James. Don't apologize to me. You're the victim here. He reached across the table and gripped my forearm. I know this might seem like I'm just saying what you want to hear, but I want you to understand something. When you married Victoria, I gained a son. You've been part of my family for 6 years. What she's done doesn't change that. Thank you, sir. I mean it. Whatever happens after this, whatever she does, however things fall out, you're still family to me. You understand? I hadn't expected that. The emotion hit me harder than I'd anticipated, and I had to look away for a moment to collect myself. I understand. You do what you need to do. I'll be there, and I won't say a word to her beforehand. Thank you. He released my arm and sat back. For the first time, I saw how old he looked. How tired. Like a man watching his world reshape itself into something unrecognizable. She was everything to me, he said quietly. After her mother left, it was just the 2 of us. I thought I'd raised her right. I thought I knew her. I thought... He stopped, gathered himself. I thought the values I drilled into her had taken root. Duty, loyalty, honesty. Those words weren't just words to me. They were the foundation of everything. They weren't just words to me either. No, I know they weren't. That's what makes this worse. He rubbed a hand over his face. I keep thinking about the last time I visited. Thanksgiving. She seemed so happy. Both of you did. And I thought, they're going to be okay. The fertility stuff is hard, but they'll get through it. She's good at pretending. Apparently. The word came out bitter. I taught her to be strong. I never taught her to be a liar. Some things people teach themselves. James looked at me then. Really looked, with the kind of assessment that probably once decided whether young officers were worth trusting with responsibility. You're handling this remarkably well, he said. Most men in your position would be falling apart. I fell apart in private. I did my grieving alone, at 2 a.m, when there was no one to see it. What's left now is just the work. The work of dismantling your marriage. The work of protecting myself, and making sure she faces consequences for what she's done. James nodded. That's fair. That's more than fair. He signaled to the waitress for the check. Saturday then. I'll be there early. And Nathan? Yes, sir. Whatever happens after the dinner, don't disappear from my life. I'd rather keep my son-in-law than lose both of you. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. James paid the check and shook my hand again at the door. As he walked to his car, I saw him pause and look up at the sky for a long moment, shoulders bowed under the weight of what he'd just learned. Then he straightened his spine, got in his car, and drove away. Military discipline, compartmentalization, the ability to set aside devastation and function anyway. We had that in common now. The detonation came early, which taught me that even the best-laid plans have variables you can't control. 3 days before the anniversary dinner, Diane Hartley confronted Adam. She'd gotten her finances secured faster than expected, and she was done waiting. The confrontation wasn't loud, she told me later. No screaming, no thrown objects. Just bank statements spread across their kitchen table and Diane's flat, calm voice laying out everything she knew. Adam tried to deny it, then to minimize it, then to bargain. Diane was unmoved. I've already spoken to a divorce attorney, she told him. I'm filing on Monday, and I'll be supporting Nathan Cole's medical board complaint. Adam panicked, and when he panicked, he called Victoria. She took the call in our bathroom that evening. I was in the bedroom, pretending to read, listening to her muffled voice through the door. Urgent, frightened. When she came out, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. Everything okay? Work emergency. The lie came automatically. Big client issue. Susan's having a meltdown. You seem really upset. It's complicated. I might need to go help her tonight. Stay at her place. I nodded. Understanding husband, supportive partner. Do what you need to do. She packed an overnight bag with trembling hands, kissed me on the cheek, her lips were cold, and hurried out to her car. Through the window, I watched her peel out of the driveway like the house was on fire. She was going to Adam, of course, to panic together, to figure out damage control. I texted Rachel. It's accelerating. Diane confronted Adam. V just left, probably meeting him. Rachel replied, Dinner still on for Saturday? More than ever. Victoria came home Friday afternoon, exhausted and drawn. Whatever conversation she'd had with Adam, they clearly hadn't gone well. How's Susan? I asked. What? Oh, better. Crisis averted. She barely looked at me, heading straight upstairs. I'm going to shower. Long night. I let her go. watched her climb the stairs with shoulders that sagged under the weight of her collapsing lies. One more day. The restaurant was called Castellanos. Upscale Italian, private dining room in the back. I'd reserved it specifically for the occasion. My parents came, though I'd only told them there was something important happening. Rachel came, having postponed a trip to be there. And James Lawson came, sitting straight-backed and silent, his eyes fixed on his daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. Victoria arrived last, looking polished despite the obvious stress of the past few days. She'd done her makeup carefully, worn the green dress I'd bought her for her birthday, put on the pearl earrings that had been her mother's. "Sorry I'm late." She kissed my cheek, squeezed her father's shoulder, smiled at my parents. Traffic was a nightmare. We ordered drinks, made small talk. Victoria was brittle and too bright, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny, checking her phone under the table when she thought no one was looking. After the main course arrived, I stood up. "I want to say a few words," I announced. The table quieted. 6 years ago, I married the woman I thought would be my partner for life. I want to thank everyone here for being part of our journey. Victoria smiled up at me. My mother looked touched. James's face was stone, including the journey we never completed. I turned to face my wife directly. "Victoria, I have one question for you, and I'd like you to answer honestly in front of our families." Her smile flickered. "Okay. When did you get the IUD inserted? Before or after you started sleeping with Dr. Adam Hartley?" The silence that followed was absolute. Nuclear. The kind of silence that has weight and texture and the power to stop time. Victoria's face went white. Not just pale. White like all the blood had drained out of her in an instant. "Nathan, I don't know what you're—" "I have the insurance claim from the Women's Health Clinic." My voice was calm, steady. The voice I used when presenting structural analyses to skeptical review boards. "I have phone records showing you've called his personal cell over 300 times in the past year. I have photographs. I have your journal entries about not wanting my child. So I'm going to ask you again. Don't lie to me in front of your father." Victoria's eyes darted to James. He met her gaze without speaking. "Dad?" Her voice cracked. "Dad, I can explain." "Answer him," James said. His voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. Victoria started to cry. Not delicate tears. Ugly, panicked sobs. The crying of someone caught completely with nowhere to hide. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she gasped. "I never meant—" "Nathan, you have to understand." "Understand what? That you watched me inject myself with hormones every morning while you had birth control inside you? That you let me blame myself for every failed cycle? That you grieved with me, held me while I cried about our lost chances, knowing the whole time that you were making sure we'd never have a child? The IVF was destroying me." She was nearly shouting now, tears streaming. The appointments, the shots, the constant hope and disappointment, I couldn't do it anymore. And then Adam, Dr. Hartley. I pronounced the name like a verdict. The doctor who was treating us, who was treating me. Who looked me in the eye and shook my hand while he was sleeping with you. He understood what I was going through. He listened to me. You were so focused on the baby, Nathan. Always the baby, the baby, the baby. You never asked how I was feeling. I asked every single day. My voice didn't rise. I wouldn't give her that. I asked if you were okay. I asked if you needed a break. I asked if we should slow down, see a therapist, take a vacation, anything. And every time you told me you were fine. You told me you wanted this as much as I did. I was lying. The words exploded out of her, harsh and raw. I've been lying for 2 years because I couldn't figure out how to tell you the truth. I didn't want your baby, Nathan. I didn't want your life. I wanted out, but I didn't know how to leave without becoming the villain. The table was frozen. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father was staring at Victoria like he'd never seen her before. Rachel had her phone out, recording, I realized. Smart. James stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. Victoria. His voice was barely above a whisper. Look at me. She turned to her father, mascara streaking her cheeks. I raised you to have honor, he said. I raised you to understand that your word means something. That commitment means something. That you don't solve problems by lying and sneaking and betraying the people who trust you. He paused. I don't know who you've become, but this woman in front of me, this is not my daughter. Dad, I hope you figure out how to live with yourself. I really do. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. But I can't watch it happen. He walked out without looking back. Victoria made a sound, a wounded animal sound, and buried her face in her hands. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the divorce papers, laid them on the table in front of her. We're done, I said. All future communication goes through my attorney. Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant, Rachel falling into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Victoria's sobs echoing off the walls of the private dining room. I didn't look back either. The aftermath unfolded with the methodical precision I'd built into my plan. The divorce was brutal. Victoria hired a good attorney, a woman named Catherine Reeves who specialized in contested dissolutions. But Rachel and David had built an airtight case. The financial records showed clear dissipation of marital assets. Every hotel, every restaurant, every gift she'd bought for Adam came out of her share. The IVF costs were argued as marital assets she'd deliberately wasted. The judge agreed with our position and ordered her to reimburse 60%. The proceedings were ugly in the way only divorces can be. Victoria tried to paint me as cold and distant, a workaholic who'd neglected her emotional needs. Her attorney suggested that the affair was a symptom of a failing marriage, not the cause. Mrs. Cole was struggling with the emotional toll of fertility treatment, Reeves argued, during one particularly painful hearing. Mr. Cole was so focused on the outcome, the baby, that he stopped seeing his wife as a person. She was crying out for connection. I let David handle the response. Mrs. Cole secretly obtained birth control while her husband was injecting himself with hormones, he said, his voice steady and damning. She wrote in her own journal that she didn't want his child, didn't want his life, 18 months before the marriage ended. This wasn't a woman crying out for connection. This was a woman who had already decided to leave but didn't have the courage to say so. Instead, she let her husband suffer needlessly while she carried on an affair with his own doctor. The judge wasn't sympathetic to Victoria's position. She ended up with far less than she'd expected. No spousal support. Her income was nearly equal to mine. Limited claim to the house. I'd made the down payment with an inheritance from my grandmother, which was documented as separate property. By the time the final decree was signed, Victoria was starting over with a rented apartment downtown and a savings account that had been gutted by her own choices. The medical board complaint moved forward with the weight of documented evidence. With my testimony, Diane's separate complaint, and the records of previous incidents that surfaced during the investigation, Dr. Adam Hartley's career entered a death spiral. The board investigator called me twice for follow-up questions. The second time, she told me something I hadn't expected. 2 more women had come forward after hearing about the complaint. Women who'd been too afraid or too ashamed to speak up before. Women who'd convinced themselves that what happened was somehow their fault. Your complaint opened a door, the investigator said. You may have helped more people than you know. Adam wasn't immediately stripped of his license. These things take time, as the attorney had warned, but he was suspended pending investigation. The fertility clinic terminated his employment with a carefully worded press release about upholding the highest standards of professional conduct. His name became radioactive in the reproductive medicine community. No other clinic would touch him. Diane divorced him efficiently and without mercy. She got the house, the better car, and primary custody of their daughters. Adam moved into a condo across town and started working at a pharmaceutical company in a non-clinical role, the best he could manage with his reputation in tatters. From what I heard, he tried reaching out to Victoria once. She blocked him. As for Victoria and Adam's relationship, it collapsed under the weight of its consequences. When the affair was just a secret adventure, when they were partners in deception, it was exciting. When it became the documented cause of 2 destroyed marriages, a ruined medical career, and public humiliation, the excitement evaporated. They blamed each other for getting caught. They fought about who had been careless. By the time my divorce was finalized, they weren't speaking. Victoria tried to contact me several times in the months that followed. Emails I didn't read. Texts I deleted without responding. A handwritten letter that Rachel intercepted at my office and returned unopened. I know from Rachel, who heard from a mutual acquaintance, that Victoria was in therapy, trying to understand why she'd made the choices she made. I hope that's true, for whatever it's worth. Not because I forgive her, but because I'd rather she fix herself than continue being who she was. Her father never came around. James Lawson doesn't disown people publicly. That's not his style. But the weekly calls became monthly. The visits stopped entirely. For Victoria, who'd spent her entire life seeking his approval, that silence was probably worse than anything else that happened. 6 months after the dinner, I walked into a fertility clinic, a different one, across town from Lakewood. The waiting room was filled with couples, young ones, older ones, nervous ones, hopeful ones. I remembered sitting in rooms like this with Victoria, holding her hand, believing we were partners in the same dream. The nurse called my name and led me back to a consultation room. Mr. Cole, Dr. Patterson will be with you shortly. I see from your intake forms that you're interested in discussing options for single parenthood? That's right. Donor eggs, surrogacy? Both. I want to understand all the paths. She nodded, professional and kind, and left me alone with my thoughts. The door opened a few minutes later. Dr. Patterson was a woman in her 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on her desk. Mr. Cole, I've reviewed your file. Your previous clinic forwarded your records. I'm sorry for everything you went through. Thank you. I also want to be clear about something before we start. She met my eyes directly. What was done to you was unconscionable. The betrayal by your ex-wife, the ethical violations by her partner. You deserved none of it. And I want you to know that nothing like that will ever happen in my practice. I hadn't expected that. Something in my chest loosened slightly. I appreciate you saying that. Now, she opened a folder. Let's talk about what's possible. You're 37, in good health, with viable specimens in storage from your previous IVF attempts. Egg donation and gestational surrogacy are both options. The process is lengthy and expensive, but it's absolutely achievable. I still want to be a father. Then let's figure out how to make that happen. The crib came in a flat-pack box with an instruction manual that was half pictures and half incomprehensible text in 12 languages. I spread the pieces across the floor of what used to be my home office, now converted into a nursery painted soft yellow, and began the assembly. My dog, a 3-year-old retriever mix named Scout, whom I'd adopted 6 months after the divorce, watched from the doorway with her head tilted. Don't judge me, I told her. I build buildings. I can handle a crib. She wagged her tail, unconvinced. The bolts were tiny. The Allen wrench was flimsy. The instructions showed a smiling cartoon figure completing each step as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I thought about everything as I worked. The years of trying. The injections and the appointments and the hope and the crushing disappointments. The betrayal that had gutted my marriage and my self-worth. The rage that had fueled my methodical revenge. And then the slow, patient work of rebuilding, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one small step forward after another. The surrogate, a kind woman named Jennifer who had 2 children of her own and wanted to help someone else have what she had, was 32 weeks along. A boy. Healthy, according to all the ultrasounds. Due in 8 weeks. I would be a father. Not the way I'd planned. Not with the person I'd expected. But it would happen. All those years of wanting, of hoping, of blaming myself for failures that weren't my fault. They would finally amount to something. The last bolt tightened with a satisfying click. I stepped back and looked at the completed crib. Simple white frame, clean lines, sturdy construction. Ready and waiting. Scout patted over and sniffed the crib legs, then looked up at me as if seeking approval. Good enough for a structural engineer's kid, I told her. That's the standard we're aiming for. My phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. Mom says dinner at 7. She's making your favorite. I typed back, on my way. I gave Scout a pat, grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The nursery glowed in the afternoon light behind me. Yellow walls, white crib, a rocking chair my mother had found at an antique store. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine. Built from the rubble of what had been, redesigned for what was coming. And unlike some structures, this one wasn't going to collapse.